Ask anybody who was smoking weed back in the 70s what the best they ever had was, and a lot of them will give you the same answer. Panama Red. The only problem is, you cannot get it anymore. It ruled the entire decade. It had its own hit song on the radio, and then it just disappeared. This is the story of Panama Red. So here's the first thing you've got to know about Panama Red. Nobody created it. There's no breeder in this story, no seed company, no secret grow room. Panama Red is what's called a landrace, and that just means nature built it on its own. With hundreds of generations of wild cannabis growing in the hot, humid tropics of Panama, slowly adapting to that exact place, until the plants there turned into something you couldn't find anywhere else on Earth. Most accounts point the origin of this strain to the Pearl Islands, this remote little chain out off Panama's Pacific coast, known as the home of the very best, because of their isolation. And their history, because Panama and Colombia were literally the same country until 1903, which is why Panama Red is considered a close cousin of Colombia's famous Punto Rojo, meaning red dot. Same family of wild mountain sativas, just split apart by a border. And the name came straight from the way it looked, because Panama Red didn't even look like normal weed. It grew tall and lanky, with long, skinny leaves and these stretched out, wispy buds. And those buds came wrapped in rusty, reddish hairs, with the cured flower taking on this clay-like red tint that nothing else had. There's a story from 1969 of buyers straight up refusing to believe it was even marijuana because weed was supposed to be green, and this stuff was red. And just so we're clear, that red color was pure cosmetics, a genetic quirk, and nothing more. It had nothing to do with the high it gave at all. Now, to understand how it took over the whole country, you've got to picture what American weed actually was back then, because it was rough. Through the late 60s and 70s, about 70% of all the weed smoked in America was imported. And most of it showed up as pressed bricks from Mexico, crushed flat, packed with seeds and stems, harsh as sandpaper. That was just the standard. That's what you smoked. So the handful of imports that stood above that brick weed became the first real brand names weed ever had. Stuff like Acapulco Gold out of Mexico, Colombian Gold out of South America, and Maui Wowie out of Hawaii, which we covered in its own video. And sitting right at the top of that whole list was Panama Red. In an era with no dispensaries, no labels, and no lab tests, just saying those two words told everybody in the room that you had the good stuff. And people paid up for it too. Regular Mexican brick was going for around $80 to $120 a pound, and it got flipped in $10 ounces, the famous lids. But Panama Red commanded roughly 4 times the going ounce price. Now I've got to be honest with you about the potency here, because this part gets exaggerated constantly. Nobody ever lab tested real Panama Red back in the day. Those tests basically didn't exist yet. What we do know is that government testing later found the average street weed of the 70s carried only around 1 to 2% THC. And even that number is probably a little low, since they were testing old confiscated bricks that had been sitting around for months, losing strength. So when something genuinely potent finally landed, it felt like a completely different drug. And here's the coolest scientific detail in this whole story. A researcher at Auburn University took Panama Red seeds and grew them in totally different places, like down in the Panama Canal Zone, on the Auburn campus in Alabama, and way up in New Hampshire. And the plants came out with similar THC every single time. So the magic was never Panama's sunshine. It was locked in the genetics themselves. And that high is what turned regular customers into full-on believers, because Panama Red delivered the exact opposite of getting couch-locked. Smokers described this clear, soaring, energetic, almost psychedelic head high, like some euphoric and creative type of feeling. The kind of up feeling that had people talking and laughing. But part of that experience, people felt, really traces back to the terpene profile. Panama Red is dominated by myrcene, which in a pure sativa context like this doesn't sedate the way it can in indicas. It works with limonene and the natural sativa genetics to push that uplifting, cerebral effect that made the strain legendary. Now, as for how it first reached America, the story goes that one of the first big loads came north on an old military boat that got converted into a fishing vessel with over a ton of Panama Red hidden underneath a catch of tuna, sailing straight into San Francisco Bay right under the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, is that true, you may ask? Well, the truth is, nobody can prove it, so file it under legend. But the fact that people tell that story tells you exactly how mythical this weed had become. Because the culture didn't just smoke Panama Red, it sang about it. In 1973, a band called the New Riders of the Purple Sage put out a song literally titled Panama Red. It was written by a guy named Peter Rowan, who actually wrote it back in 1969, and his old band rejected it for being too country. But Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead heard it and pushed Rowan to hand it over to the New Riders. And the song became a radio hit, the title track of an album that cracked the Billboard charts and eventually went gold. What makes the song so perfect is that it doesn't treat Panama Red like a plant. It treats it like an outlaw, this bandit character who rolls into town and turns everybody's life upside down, to the point where nobody can get any work done once he shows up. And the references just kept stacking after that. There was an earlier 60s pop song by the same name. Van Halen shouted it out in their song Amsterdam. It showed up in movies like Apocalypse Now, Detroit Rock City, and Meet the Parents. It got name-dropped constantly in the legendary stoner comic The Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. And even the novelist Thomas Pynchon worked it into his writing. And by the mid-70s, Panama Red wasn't just a strain anymore. It was a household phrase for great weed, sitting right at the heart of that whole Cheech and Chong era of stoner culture. So how does the undisputed king of American weed just disappear? Well, it wasn't one thing. It was everything at once. The first hit came when American growers finally learned how to make sinsemilla, which is just seedless homegrown flower. And by 1980, the average seized brick weed was testing around 1% THC, while domestic sinsemilla was testing over 6%. Homegrown had lapped the imports completely. But the real killer was the second thing, and that's the indica revolution. Through the late 70s, seeds started arriving in America from Afghanistan and the Hindu Kush Mountains. And those plants were everything Panama Red wasn't. They were short, they were bushy, and they were fast, which made them perfect for hiding indoors or tucking into a backyard. Now compare that to Panama Red. It's a tall, stretchy giant that needs 11 to 13 weeks or more to finish, sometimes pushing close to 100 days, and it throws airy, fluffy buds instead of dense nugs. So if you're a grower risking prison time, that choice makes itself. By the early 80s, almost every plant in America had indica blood in it, and the pure, slow sativas just got left behind. And then the government came along and finished the job. Nixon launched something called Operation Intercept in 1969, putting nearly 2,000 agents on the Mexican border to search every single car, and they stopped over 2.3 million people in the first week alone. Then, through the 1970s, the DEA backed a program that sprayed foreign weed fields with a toxic herbicide called paraquat, figuring it would wipe out the crops. But the plants didn't die. They got harvested and shipped to America and smoked anyway, poison and all. And once people found out, It became a full-blown health scare, especially when testing showed that up to a third of the weed in some parts of the country was contaminated. All of a sudden, imported weed wasn't just harsher than homegrown. It was potentially dangerous for them also. And while all that was happening, Panama itself was changing too. Because different types of substance money took over the country in the 80s under the dictator Noriega, with cartel networks, some even being tied to the Medellin cartel, who were funneling product through the country. And that business was getting so big, it got to the point to where those old cannabis fields got converted into jungle landing strips and drug labs. But eventually, they got caught. And when the US finally indicted Noriega in 1988, the charges included conspiring to ship 1.4 million pounds of weed into America. And after that, Panama's whole weed culture collapsed, and the strain only survived out there on those remote Pearl Islands, where the breeze and the isolation quietly kept the old genetics alive. Meanwhile, back in the States, the name was so valuable that dealers started slapping Panama Red on anything with a red hair on it. And the real genetics got hybridized into oblivion, and sadly by the 90s, the strain that ruled America was basically gone. But legends leave seeds behind, literally. These days, preservationist seed banks treat old land races like endangered species, and a Spanish company called Ace Seeds actually rebuilt a Panama line using 3 surviving relatives, including a Panama cut from 1974 and that Colombian cousin Punto Rojo, all to try and recreate the taste and the effect of the 70s. There are collectors out there guarding what they swear are original genetics. And a few brave legal farms, mostly up in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, actually grow Panama Red today, even with that brutal 3-month flower time, including a Washington cultivator called Ravengrass, who've made preserving authentic Panama genetics part of their whole identity. And in a full circle twist, Panama itself legalized medical cannabis in 2021, becoming the first country in Central America to do it, and opened its first cannabis pharmacy in January of 2026. So is any of it the true original Panama Red? Honestly, that's disputed, and anybody selling you certainty is selling you marketing. But the bloodline, in some form, made it out alive. So at the end of the day, Panama Red is the ghost story of American weed. It's a strain nobody bred and nobody owned. Born wild on a chain of islands that crossed an ocean in fishing boats, ruled an entire decade, got its own hit song on the radio, and then got erased by faster plants, harder drugs, and a war on the very roots that carried it. Every modern strain we cover on this channel lives in the world that Panama Red built, and almost none of the people smoking them have ever tasted it.